Introducing Guhan Ramanan, President, Business Transformation at Neeyamo. He is a GP HR certified professional and is specialized in setting up and leading complex delivery organizations. With his hands-on experience in software development, he has led large-scale process consulting, solution design, infrastructure setup, and transformation initiatives. Guhan has managed several global delivery engagements across all major geographic regions. Please welcome Guhan to present on the topic Technovation Special, walkthrough of the vision, how Neeyamo is making touchless global payroll a reality.
Thank you for the warm introduction, and it is a pleasure to be with all of you at the Payroll Beyond Borders event. Thank you very much for making the time. Truly honored. In my session today, I wanted to talk about a topic that in today's time and age seems to resonate a little more strongly, right? I mean, all through COVID, we've all been told, don't touch this surface, don't touch that surface, social distancing and so on. And cheekily enough, that got us started thinking about, what if we touch payroll a little less? What if we could actually do touchless payroll, right? So we wanted to talk to you about how we are approaching what we call touchless payroll, right? Now, but before that, a little backstory. And through the years, payroll has always been a hyper-local activity, right? It's always been a very manual process. There were always many vendors within each country. Sometimes they're very regional, very hyper-local service, really, right? That's really how payroll was. And over the years, it evolved into a more of a regional function where organizations began to take a slightly broader look at regions and say, okay, these countries have similarities, so perhaps we can provide a common service across these regions, or how we can consolidate them and so on, right? So there was a reasonable amount of standardization, and then there were a number of cluster teams along with payroll centers of excellence for each country, right? Now, as we evolved through regional, then we began to see global players, right? Not too many of them, but the thought process has now expanded considerably ever since the HRIS went global and a lot of other supporting technology went global. They began to ask the question, why can't we do payroll globally, right? And think about a harmonized process using a cloud platform, ensure that we're able to synergize resources. I mean, providing inputs is really the same if it's the same platform, and ensure that we're able to have payroll that is compliant, right? The journey of payroll has really gone from local to regional to global. But depending on the model, whether if you had a global provider or a per country model or an in-house software to do things, the time taken could be very different. The complexities and the challenges could be very different, right? This was true at every model, but when you bring it together at a global level, it begins to take on a slightly different shape and hue, right? So let's take a closer look at a traditional payroll flow, right? Regardless of the country, regardless of the region, there are three broad steps in a payroll process, right? So the first is what we call the pre-payroll activities, where you are planning for the payroll for the month, ensuring that you're able to bring all of the inputs together, ensure that the input is correct, it's validated, because a payroll input is really, it takes a village. So many different people have to participate to provide all of those inputs, right? And once all of the inputs have sort of been gathered, then you have to dispatch it either to a provider or to your platform. The payroll calculation happens, there is validation of the output, and then you confirm that all is well, and you commence the fund transfer. This is the first two stages where you have the input preparation, the payroll process, and then the third stage of payroll is really where you have the post-payroll process, right? Where you have the actual payout, the accounting that happens, all of the statutory compliances that need to happen, followed by all of the internal as well as the external reporting, right? So that is the third stage of the payroll process. So if you think about it, pre-payroll, the actual payroll, and then the post-payroll process. Now, across all of this, whether the model has evolved from a regional, local to a global, the places that you see where there is a significant amount of time spent is still about the same, right? You spend a lot of time gathering inputs, validating that they're correct, ensuring that the input is sent in the appropriate format. If a conversion is required for the provider, then you have to do that. And once the output has come in, if you're doing a round of validation on the output, if you're verifying with the previous month's output and so on and so forth, and then once you do the sign off, the process has a number of different places where there is manual intervention, which is very necessary today, right? Now, we wanted to sort of think about this a little differently. What if we could step back and ask ourselves, is this much touch in a payroll process, unless there are material changes between one pay period and another, your master data is broadly the same. You have, of course, your leavers and joiners, and your transactional data is changing. But does this require this much intervention? Right? What if we could think about it a little differently? Right? And so we began to ask ourselves, what are some of the challenges that you have today in a traditional flow that sort of looks like this, right? So your inputs broadly are still manual, right? You still are providing them the same way, whether it is into a different system or you're collating them. The input process is broadly still manual. And even if you've managed to integrate your core HRIS, your non-HRIS inputs are still manual, right? So there is, depending on the model you have, whether it is a local, regional, or a global model, there is significant variance in the service levels or the turnaround times. This could vary by country, by provider, by your pay frequency, and so on, right? And then there is always questions around the quality of the output and how many different versions it needs to go through before it is finalized. And inherently, when you are looking at a multi-vendor model for your global payroll, it also becomes a little more complicated because you have to manage different providers and ensuring that the teams that you have to support them are available. And so if you have turnover, managing it on either side of the fence becomes a challenge, right? And what used to be a big advantage with a very local provider is that they would be aware of compliances and things like that. But what we're increasingly seeing is, as we take a more harmonized approach to global payroll, we're finding quite a few places where there are non-compliances because the interpretation from a local perspective could be different than at a corporate level, right? So you're always worried if you're at the corporate function and you're looking at all of your different countries, you're always worried, are we making sure that our payroll is done right? And then depending on how you have set up integration, there could always be integration issues. Is the data coming in right? Are we missing something? Is everything where it's supposed to be? And so on, right? Now, these payroll challenges at the heart of it have a significant amount of manual intervention at every stage, right? So whether it is at import, whether it is at managing the process, whether it is at verifying reports. So we wanted to ask, what would a touchless process look like? What if we could eliminate as much of the manual as possible? What would remain, right? So we wanted to call this touchless payroll. And what do we mean by touchless payroll? Answering a very simple question, right? Like all of the other processes that we have that runs pretty much on clockwork, what if payroll ran automatically, right? So for example, you know what your pay cycles are, what the pay frequency is. And so when it hits a certain date, according to the calendar that you've defined, it initiates a trigger for the entire payroll process because it's a single platform, right? So it's monitoring the dates, the schedule, and so it starts the entire process. And if you already integrated the different systems, these are feeding inputs to our payroll application on an ongoing basis, not on a particular day, but on an ongoing basis, right? So as and when the inputs are coming in, they're getting validated and compared against standard events and validated using machine learning. I mean, when you have a new hire or a termination or any one of the standard lifecycle events that impact payroll, the application can sense that, pick it up and put it into the appropriate bucket so that come payroll time, all of these events are already segregated and ready for you to review and sort of approve, right? And if all looks okay, and you say, okay, I mean, if I've kept my HRI as okay, and I just have to give one sign off, we can do a complete gross to net pay run because we have pre-configured in-house engines. And in fact, we'd like to be able to give you the ability to do this even before you sign off and confirm, right? So what if you could look at your payroll even before you signed off input, right? So what if you could run payroll even with partial inputs? So those are the kind of questions that we will started to ask. What if we could give you the power to be able to see your output with the current set of inputs? Then if you miss something, fix it, and then you'll be able to rerun it all within the same framework, right? And if you're able to run a complete gross to net, and we're able to give you all of the post payroll reports. Now, wherever it is possible to automate the reports and deliver it to government organizations or to external third parties, or even within your organization to either a data lake or to if you have a data warehouse and you need us to feed that, or a global MIS and so on, right? So all of your tax, your compliance, your post payroll reports, everything that we can sort of take care of from a system perspective, what if we could do that without intervention, right? Once you sign off the payroll input, all we have to do is to be able to run the output and deliver all of the auxiliary parts of the process that are connected directly to the output, right? And then we took care of the period end closing along with the reporting and analytics. Now, much as we'd like to believe that a paperless office is a digital office, right? But we all know that that's not true. It's what we'd like to think about as less paper, more digital, right? And a touchless payroll is less touch, more payroll, right? What if we could automate as much as we could and minimize the intervention? We could give back the time that you're spending today, and you could use it to spend it on different things, right? And not just necessarily on payroll. Now, this is while the vision is very simple, it's not easy. There a number of different steps have to happen to make this happen, right? Especially during the initial setup, you want to make sure that we integrate as much as possible. We're able to set up as many validations as possible. We're able to ensure that the configuration of the engine is as complete as possible, and so on and so forth, right? So, but the idea is that we want to be able to put this thought into our platform so that we can start delivering these as we go forward, right? Now, if we thought about what the benefits of something like this was, right? Let's look at what it will reduce: the number of errors, the number of touch points, and definitely if you're still using paper for providing inputs, we've got applications for pretty much everything, so we can at least help reduce paper. Right? Now, when we say it is going to reduce errors, it's obviously, I mean, any system is prone to error, but the idea is that you automate it so that if an error does happen, you bring it down to a system or a configuration that is causing the error and not human error, right? So as far as possible, we'd like to be able to reduce the human error, the number of touch points involved in this, right? So the first draft, second draft, if we can eliminate some of that, that makes a huge difference, because then we will actually be simplifying the entire process, right? Because once you have a process that is very clearly defined in terms of how is this going to come in and how is this going to get validated and how the output is going to come, it also becomes more streamlined because it offers lesser opportunities for interference, correction, and so on. And the compliance engine is always going to be automated because we are always monitoring all of the different compliances that are happening in the country, and we'll ensure that it is updated with the latest compliances that are required. And again, we will be translating those compliances either into a report or into an outcome or into something that is measurable so that the application can hook in and feed that compliance correctly, right? Of course, the platform is a cloud platform, so it is entirely scalable, fully integrated with your current solutions, and is secure because we're monitoring it far more regularly, right? So we are constantly 24/7. This application is monitored, maintained, and managed. So your payroll not only becomes faster, can also become significantly more efficient. So think about it. Today, your payroll cutoffs are at a particular date, and then you have to work backwards from your bank pay date to when your provider can give it to you and so on. But what if we could eliminate all the other bottlenecks other than just ensuring that the bank file goes to your provider, your bank on time, right? So then literally, if we can crunch that window or we can expand that window really to give you more time, crunch our processing time and give you more time to get inputs in, it changes the game in many different ways, right? So you can literally be accepting integration level inputs right up until the last date because it's one button to get the entire payroll process completed and out, right? So if you can do that, then the need to be able to run off cycles gets eliminated. And even if you have to, they're super quick. You don't have to wait a 3-day window, 4-day window, and so on. So if we can streamline this process, then you begin to deliver significantly more efficient processes from a cost perspective, from a data quality perspective, because it is as close to real time as possible, right? So we wanted to be able to step back to ask ourselves, what can we do from a payroll perspective to make this fundamentally different, right? So we'd like to be able to offer a touchless payroll that truly makes a difference to how you're using your payroll data today and your employees' experience of the overall payroll process. Who knows? With a touchless payroll, your employees even might be able to run their own payroll themselves, literally, someday. But that's a story for another day. Thank you very much for your time. Should you have any questions around the presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'd be more than happy to take those and answer those questions right after this. And as you can see, my credentials, my email ID is over there. So in case you need any other clarifications or questions, more than happy to assist in any way possible. Yeah. Thank you very much.